Now let's look at the problems arising from manufacturing decline. Obviously, when you see manufacturing sectors reduce so much, that's a price we have to pay. So one of the first thing we care about is jobs. Jobs are particularly important. Given the spread of COVID-19 and over the past 6 months, Canada's unemployment rate now has increased to more than 12%. Creating jobs will be probably the most important thing over the next few years. And arguably, it will be probably more important than just increase GDP by 0.5% or 0.8%. Because jobs not just about to overwage and then to raise families. When you have jobs, and then Canadian will have money to spend. As I said earlier, household consumption represents the biggest part of Canada's economy. So when people have job, they can also consume goods, and which also boosts our economy. So jobs is particularly important. However, if you look at the total output, of course, from 1970s until now, our manufacturing output increased a lot. However, as you can see from the slides, in year 2008, due to global financial crisis, the output of manufacturing actually declined very, very dramatic. So even until now, we haven't totally recovered from 2008's global financial crisis. But more than that, when I say jobs, I'm not just talking about how many people who get jobs. Actually, I'm also concerned with we have some job positions vanished, disappeared forever. For example, if you compare to year 2001 and 2016, and because of the decline of manufacturing, so our manufacturing sectors actually offer less than 500,000 job positions. So of course, from year 2015, as I said, that we slowly recover from year 2008 global financial crisis, and our manufacturing output increased a little bit. But even so, in total, we still lost 300,000 jobs permanently. So one reason why we want to bring manufacturing back, obviously, is not just we need economic growth, but we also want to bring jobs back. Manufacturing is not just about jobs. It's also about national security. Obviously, beginning from 1970s, the whole world experienced the second wave of globalizations. Then from 1970s until 2018, the globalization became more and more successful. However, beginning from 2018, due to US and China trade war, the first time we see that globalization actually reduced. Today, because of a COVID pandemic, we probably even see like a globalization has reduced to a level which we have never seen before. So one consequence from deglobalization is now a lot of countries, we need to maintain certain essential products. They need to be manufactured in Canada. Just say something like least important, and it's not even high-tech technology, it's something very, very basic. Let's talk about masks. For example, like Medicom, it's a Canadian company. We all know that during the COVID pandemic, Canada, even our hospital, cannot find enough masks, not just to protect our citizens, but even our doctors and nurses working in the hospital cannot get enough masks. But it doesn't mean that we don't produce masks. Yes, we do. For example, Medicom, it has a factory in Shanghai. Every day, it produces more than 3 million masks a day. But because the coronavirus started to spread in Wuhan, Chinese government just banned it. And even is manufactured by Canadian company, it is not allowed to export to Canada. So this will be a very small example, but it also tells something. Sometimes you have to maintain certain manufacturing capabilities in order to maintain your national security. The third thing regarding manufacturing is about social issues. The loss of jobs is not just an economic issue, it's also a social issue. Actually, we find that, for example, like in Canada, when the region's manufacturing sectors decline, we find that the employment and the wage in that region also decline. Not just that, it also leads to some social problems. For example, there's a Nobel Prize winner. He recently published a book in year 2008. He tracked Americans' middle-aged white men who don't have a college degree. They found something pretty amazing. If you look at 20th century, because of the advancement of our medical technology and medical facilities, one of the most significant results is the death rate reduced over time. The trend lasts for a century, has never been changed. But what they found is, since year 2000, they found a group which I talked about earlier, the middle-aged white men and who don't have a college degree. The first time in history over the past 100 years, this group's death rate actually increased over time. It was shocking news because in any case, we have a better medical technology and medical facility in 21st century compared to 20th century. So why this group, particularly this group, they suffer from death rate. And then they do research to find that the top 3 reasons responsible for these people's death are: first, suicide; second, alcohol; third, drug. And they also find that these people, they are very unhappy. They usually have a problem to find a partner. Or even they can find a partner, the relationship cannot last long. And most of the time, it's very often like you have a kid, but the kids maybe go with the mother and live in someone else's family. And this group of people, they don't have jobs. They usually have a health problem. What makes things even worse, they have mental issues. And they are not happy. They don't have a relationship. They don't have social life. So where do this group of people live? Actually, we find that these people mostly are from the sectors which most significantly affected by manufacturing decline, which also relate to Chinese products imports. But that's another story. So, turns out these people, they are very unhappy. So either they never vote, or if they participate in political activity, they become very radical. They either support extremely left or extremely right. So just divided the society into two polars, and eventually created a lot of problems. And we see the populist leaders start to emerge. Obviously, these kind of issues, if we don't do anything, if we allow the manufacturing sectors to decline in Canada, like what we have seen in the past 50 years, it might happen in Canada too. Another consequence resulting from decline of manufacturing sector is about Canada's international competitiveness. If you look at Let's look at our neighbor, United States. United States, traditionally, America is different from what we hear from some European countries or Asian countries. America basically strongly opposed to any industry policy. What does it mean? By industry policy, usually meaning the government pick up some potential winners, industries that might have potential, and then use the government funding to subsidize those companies and hope that this company can gain international competitiveness and then to compete in the international market. But American traditionally, because of the economic origin, it doesn't matter like before 1980s or after 1980s neoliberal movement. In the United States, traditionally, after the Second World War, on average, Americans strongly opposed the idea to adopt industry policy. But until last month, the first time after the Second World War, we see that American government changed its policy. Now, American Congress passed a law called the American Foundry Act of 2020. The whole idea is Americans realize that now America's semiconductor manufacturing has declined very significantly. I'll give you one example. In the whole world, now only 3 companies can produce the most advanced semiconductors. And those semiconductors, they make chips, which has been widely used, from defense to use in weapon, in fighting jet, or even in a camera, or even in computer. Basically, in any kind of electronic department, we all use semiconductors. But nowadays, because it is a very capital intensive, technology intensive, and highly competitive environment. So it turns out that for the most advanced semiconductor, like what you see in Apple's iPhone, or in Samsung's Galaxy phone, or in computer, or even in F-35 fighting jet, or CPU, and so on and so forth. For those most advanced semiconductor products, only 3 companies can produce that. One is America's Intel. The second is South Korea's Samsung. The third, probably you guys never heard of it, is Taiwan's TSMC, which stands for Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Companies. The reason you probably never heard of it is because TSMC only produced for other companies, but it never have its own design and it never have its own product. However, out of the 3, TSMC actually has the best technology. And it just released the news for about 2 weeks ago. Intel, the first time, admit that Intel's now semiconductor manufacturing capabilities cannot compete with TSMC. So Intel decided to outsource high-end product to TSMC. And obviously, this is a waking up call to Americans. So that's why they passed American Foundries Act of 2020. They just want to use the government's money to subsidize manufacturing of semiconductors and hopefully bring some manufacturing capability back. By the way, the Trump administration also forces TSMC to set up a high-end foundry to produce the most sensitive semiconductor in America. And TSMC just announced that you will have a foundry located in Arizona. So the reality is, due to uncertainty arising from deglobalization and COVID pandemic, now no any company want to invest because the uncertainty is too high. Even we see that basically every government in the world keep printing money, and people get the money. They invest where? They invest in the stock market, they invest in financial market, but the company is still very conservative because they don't see the market, they don't see the demand. In terms of investment, they are very, very careful. So it turns out that the whole world, now every country is competing for foreign direct investment. One of the most obvious examples would be United States. Even United States changed its policy since the World War II, start to use industry policy to subsidize semiconductor manufacturing. The implication is if our government, we don't act today, we are going to lose in the international competition for foreign direct investment. In the long run, we will lose our international competitiveness. We cannot compete with other advanced economies. That's also another problem, which is widely known in academics but not so much in public, which is if you observed labor productivity, if you compare Canada's labor productivity and United States labor productivity, we find one very interesting phenomenon. Over the past 40 years, the gap between Canada's labor productivity and US's labor productivity actually is widening. Okay, let me say again. It doesn't mean that Canada, we don't increase our labor productivity. No, it's not true. Of course, we invest. We have new technology, we have R&D, and then we have education, we have training. So our labor productivity actually increases over time. But the reality is the speed we increase are way too slow. So it turns out that the gap between Canada and United States in terms of labor productivity is widening over time. So which means compared to 40 years ago, today Canada's companies become less productive compared to 40 years ago relative to Americans' counterparts. More specifically, if you look at 40 years ago, Canada's labor productivity accounts for 90% of US labor productivity. But now today, we only account for 70% of US labor productivity. So this is something we have to address. Otherwise, in the long run, we cannot compete in the international market. So what's the reason for the widening labor productivity gap? There are a couple of reasons. One of the things that we invest less in machine and equipment, especially we find that the most important thing is we don't invest, we don't use enough ICT, information and communication technology. And also, we don't invest enough in skilled laborers. It also due to manufacturing decline and also because our small and medium-sized companies compared to Americans' small and medium-sized companies, our small and medium-sized companies become less and less productive in a relative sense. So now I have been talking about two things. First, the decline of manufacturing in Canada. Second, the widening labor productivity between Canada and the United States. Now I'm going to talk about the third issue we are facing now, which is we get insufficient infrastructure investment. For example, it used to be like Canada spent more than 3% GDP in infrastructure, but the number reduced very, very fast. By 1979, the number Canada spent on infrastructure has reduced to 0.4%, from 3% to 0.4%. So in 2015, the scholars also make some estimate. We find that due to the long-term insufficient investment in infrastructure, we find that in 2015, if we invest $1 billion in infrastructure, we are going to create 16,700 jobs, and the GDP will increase by 1.14